It was a bustling morning in downtown San Francisco. The streets were filled with the usual mix of people rushing to their jobs, commuters on their bikes, and tourists snapping photos of the city's iconic skyline. In the heart of the city, nestled between tech startups and gourmet food trucks, was a small coffee shop called Bean and Brew. It was the kind of place where the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans seemed to wrap around you like a warm hug. People lined up, chatting about their day, typing away on their laptops, and enjoying their drinks. But today, something felt different. There was a noticeable tension in the air, a subtle hum of unease. Mia, a 24-year-old woman with Down syndrome, stood behind the counter. She had been working at Bean and Brew for the past 3 years and loved every second of it. There was something special about the rhythm of the coffee shop, the way the steam hissed from the espresso machine, the comforting hum of background chatter, the feeling of being part of something bigger than herself. Mia had always been determined to prove that her disability didn't define her, and working here was her way of showing the world that she could handle anything life threw at her. Today, however, was different. The door swung open, and in walked a man who immediately caught Mia's attention. He was tall, with a sharp jawline and an air of authority that seemed to make the entire room hush as he entered. He wore a tailored suit that looked like it had been custom-made for him, and his piercing blue eyes scanned the room as he approached the counter. Mia was used to serving all sorts of people, techies in casual attire, tourists wearing oversized sunglasses, and regulars who knew her by name. But this man, he had a certain presence that made her nervous. "Good morning, sir," Mia greeted him with her warmest smile, trying her best to remain composed. The man didn't smile back. He glanced at the menu, then at her, and sneered. "You know," he said in a condescending tone, "you really should be more careful when handling the coffee machine. It's not rocket science." Mia's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. She had dealt with difficult customers before, and she wasn't about to let one comment ruin her day. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll make sure to be more careful," Mia replied, trying her best to remain calm. But the man wasn't done. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You don't belong here, do you?" he sneered. "You should be at home, not wasting your time in a place like this." Mia's heart sank. She had heard insults before, but something about this one stung deeper. She tried to push through the hurt, but the words lingered in her mind like a dark cloud. "I'm just trying to do my job, sir," Mia said, her voice shaking ever so slightly. The man's eyes flickered with amusement. "Well, you're doing it all wrong," he muttered, shaking his head in disdain. Mia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The laughter of the other customers seemed to fade away, replaced by the oppressive weight of the man's harsh words. She glanced around the coffee shop, but no one seemed to notice the exchange happening right in front of them. Suddenly, Mia's gaze shifted to the door. A figure stood there, tall and unmistakable. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur known for his work with Tesla and SpaceX, had just walked into the coffee shop. His presence was magnetic, and for a moment, everything else seemed to blur into the background. The tension in the air seemed to dissipate, as if the universe had decided that this moment was about to change everything. Elon's eyes locked onto the scene at the counter, and in an instant, he understood what was happening. He didn't hesitate. With a calm, collected stride, he walked toward the counter, his every step purposeful. The man who had been tormenting Mia didn't notice him at first, too busy barking orders at her. But when he turned to grab his cup of coffee, he froze. "Excuse me," Elon's voice cut through the tension, calm but firm. "That's enough." The man looked up, confused. "What? Who are you?" he asked, his tone dismissive. "I'm Elon Musk," came the simple response. The man's expression shifted slightly, but it wasn't from respect. "So what?" he scoffed. "That doesn't give you the right to interfere in my business." Elon's gaze never wavered. "You're being rude to her. And I don't tolerate that kind of behavior." The room seemed to hold its breath. Mia's heart raced in her chest as she watched the interaction unfold before her. She had heard of Elon Musk, of course, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined someone like him stepping in to defend her. The man, still incredulous, scoffed and took a step back. "Are you seriously defending her?" he sneered. "She's just whatever you call it. A person with Down syndrome. She shouldn't even be here." Elon's eyes darkened, and for a moment, there was a coldness to his demeanor that sent a chill down Mia's spine. "That's where you're wrong," Elon said, his voice low but filled with authority. "Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are. And if you can't treat people with kindness, you don't belong here." The man's face flushed red with embarrassment, but he didn't say another word. He turned and walked out of the coffee shop, the door swinging closed behind him with a sharp snap. Mia stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The entire coffee shop had gone silent, but Elon turned to her and gave her a reassuring smile. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Mia could hardly believe it. Elon Musk, the man who had revolutionized the tech world, was standing right in front of her, asking if she was okay. I'm fine," Mia stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't expect that." Elon chuckled softly. "Sometimes, people need to be reminded about what really matters." He turned to the other customers, who were now watching in awe, and gave them a nod. "Kindness goes a long way," he added, before turning back to Mia. "Keep doing your thing. You're doing great." As Elon Musk walked out of the coffee shop, Mia stood there, stunned. The world outside seemed to rush back in, but for a moment, all she could do was stare at the spot where he had just been. Had that really happened? Had Elon Musk really stood up for her? For the first time that day, Mia felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Mia had always been told she was different, but she never let those words define her. To her, being different was just another way of saying unique. Growing up in the heart of San Francisco, Mia was raised by her mother, Linda, who was always her biggest cheerleader and protector. Linda was a no-nonsense woman with a heart full of warmth, and from the time Mia was little, she instilled in her daughter the belief that there was no limit to what she could accomplish, no matter what anyone else said. Mia had been diagnosed with Down syndrome shortly after birth, and while that presented its own challenges, it never stopped her from pursuing her dreams. The world was often unkind when it came to people with disabilities, but Mia had never let that keep her from trying to live a fulfilling life. She went to a local school, made friends, and enjoyed her childhood just like anyone else. But when it came time for high school, Mia realized that fitting in wasn't always as easy as she'd hoped. Some kids at school would tease her, and others would ignore her. It was tough, but Linda was always there to help her pick up the pieces. She had taught Mia how to be resilient, how to shake off the hurt, and how to keep moving forward. But the road was never smooth. There were times when Mia would cry herself to sleep, feeling like she wasn't quite good enough or like the world would always see her as less than others. Despite all the challenges, Mia found comfort in the little things. She had a deep love for music and would often lose herself in the songs that filled her room. Singing was her escape, her way of letting out the feelings that words alone couldn't express. But even more than music, Mia loved coffee. There was something magical about the smell of freshly brewed beans, the way the steam swirled up into the air, and the warmth of a cup between her hands. Her love for coffee led her to apply for a job at Bean and Brew, a local cafe that was known for being inclusive and kind-hearted. The owner of Bean and Brew, Sarah, had met Mia when she was still in high school. Sarah had a soft spot for people who had been overlooked by society, and when Mia came to her asking for a job, she didn't hesitate. Mia had been working there for almost 3 years now, and it was the first place where she truly felt like she belonged. Her co-workers were kind, patient, and supportive, and they appreciated Mia's infectious energy and dedication to her work. They knew that Mia wasn't perfect, but they didn't care. She brought a light to the cafe that couldn't be ignored. Her smile was as bright as the sun, and her laughter had a way of making everyone feel like everything was going to be okay. Linda was so proud of Mia for landing the job. It wasn't always easy for her to find work, but she had proven herself, and she had built a little world where she could thrive. Mia's shift at Bean & Brew was more than just a job to her, it was her chance to prove to the world that she was more than her condition, that she was a capable, strong, and deserving person. However, being in a public-facing job meant dealing with all kinds of people. And while most customers were kind, there were those who couldn't see past Mia's disability. She had learned how to brush off the rude comments and unkind looks, but each time it stung just a little bit more. Mia never wanted pity, just respect, and she believed in herself enough to know that she could handle the tough days. That was why today, when the rude customer entered Bean & Brew, it felt like a step backward. She hadn't let anyone get under her skin in months, but something about this man's words dug deep. But Mia wasn't the type to back down. She had a fire in her that burned bright, even on her hardest days. As she made her way to the counter to prepare his coffee, she tried to push the unease aside. She had a job to do, and she would do it with all the grace and professionalism she could muster. She wasn't going to let this man ruin her day. She had dealt with far worse, and she knew she would get through this too. But little did she know, this moment would be the one that changed everything for her. And that change would come from someone she never expected, someone who had no reason to stand up for her, but did anyway. Mia stood at the counter, her hands slightly trembling as she prepared the man's coffee. She tried to focus on the task at hand, but the words he had spoken earlier echoed in her mind, over and over again. "You don't belong here, do you?" It wasn't the first time she had heard something like that, but somehow, this time it felt different. This time, the sting of his words wasn't just about his cruelty, it was about the weight of the world's unspoken judgment. The judgment that she had been battling her whole life. She could hear the man muttering to himself as he waited for his coffee. "I don't know why they let people like her work here," he said, his voice low but laced with disdain. Mia felt her heart sink, but she kept her head down, focused on the espresso machine. The rich scent of coffee beans filled the air, a comforting presence in the midst of her rising anxiety. She had to stay calm, keep it together. She wasn't going to let this man get the best of her. Not today. As she placed the coffee on the counter in front of him, she forced a polite smile. "Here you go, sir. I hope you enjoy it." The man looked at the cup, then back at her, his expression unamused. "I'll enjoy it just fine," he muttered, "but don't expect me to come back. I've seen better service at a fast food joint." His words hit like a slap, but Mia kept her composure. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. If you'd like to give us another chance, we'll be happy to serve you again," she said, her voice soft, but firm. Just as the man turned to leave, he threw one final insult over his shoulder: "People like you shouldn't be working with others. You should stick to simple tasks, like cleaning up. This," he motioned to the coffee cup, "is above you." For a moment, Mia stood frozen. The hurt was sharp, but more than that, she felt something else, something that made her want to snap. She had been called a lot of things before: slow, naive, incapable, but never had someone told her to stick to cleaning up. That was a line she hadn't expected. Before she could process what to do next, a new voice cut through the tension in the room. "Excuse me," the voice was calm, but unmistakable in its authority. "That's enough." Mia's head jerked up. It was the same man from earlier, but this time, his posture was different. He wasn't just standing at the counter anymore. He was standing tall, walking toward the man who had just insulted her. His eyes were locked onto the customer with a kind of calm intensity that was hard to ignore. Elon Musk. Mia's heart skipped a beat. No way. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur, was in her coffee shop. She had seen him in the media, stories about his work with Tesla, SpaceX, and even his Twitter controversies, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined meeting him in person. Let alone standing in front of her defending her. The rude customer turned to Elon, his face twisting in disbelief. "Who are you to interrupt me?" the man sneered, taking a step back. Elon didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady, unwavering. "I'm someone who believes in treating people with respect. Especially when they don't deserve to be disrespected," he said calmly. The man laughed, but it was a hollow laugh, as if he knew he had no real power here anymore. "What are you, her hero? You're just some rich guy who thinks he can do whatever he wants." "I'm not her hero," Elon replied, his voice dropping lower. "I'm just someone who knows that what you said was wrong." Mia's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe what was happening. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped, and the rest of the cafe was just a blur in the background. The only thing she could focus on was Elon, standing up for her like she mattered. Like she was worth something. The rude man glanced around, noticing that the entire coffee shop had fallen silent. People were watching. Mia could feel their eyes on her, but instead of embarrassment, she felt empowered. Elon's intervention had done something to the air in the room. What was once a tense, awkward moment was now charged with energy, the kind that comes from standing up for what's right. The man, now visibly uncomfortable, looked around at the other customers. No one spoke up. No one sided with him. It was clear to everyone that he had crossed a line. Finally, the man took a deep breath and glared at Elon. "You don't know what it's like," he grumbled. "To deal with someone like her every day." "I don't need to know," Elon said, taking a step closer, his voice unwavering. "Because you don't get to treat people like that, no matter who they are." The man scowled but didn't say another word. He grabbed his coffee, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving the door swinging behind him. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of what had just happened settling in. Mia's heart was still racing, but something had shifted inside her. She had expected nothing. She had prepared herself for the worst, for the same cruel treatment she had faced too many times before. But in that moment, she realized something profound: she wasn't alone. She had someone on her side. And that was enough to remind her that she was stronger than any insult, any harsh word, any judgment that might come her way. Elon turned to Mia, his eyes softening. "Are you okay?" he asked, his tone gentle, almost like a father checking on his child. Mia nodded, though she could barely find her voice. I'm fine. I didn't expect that." She couldn't help but smile a little, her nerves slowly calming. Elon gave a small, knowing smile. Sometimes people forget how powerful kindness can be. But it's never too late to remind them. Mia didn't know what to say. She had heard those words before, but coming from him, they felt like a promise. A promise that she wasn't as invisible as she had sometimes felt. Elon gave her a wink and a thumbs up before heading toward the door, leaving Mia standing there, a smile slowly spreading across her face. She wasn't just the woman behind the counter anymore. She was someone who deserved respect. And she had just been reminded that she didn't have to fight alone. The days following the encounter with Elon Musk passed by in a blur for Mia. It was as if the world had changed overnight. Her phone was flooded with messages from friends, co-workers, and even strangers, all commenting on what had happened at Bean and Brew. Some were amazed that Elon Musk had stepped in to defend her, others expressed their gratitude for his words, which had reminded them of the importance of kindness in a world that sometimes seemed too harsh. Mia couldn't believe it. She had never imagined that such a small, everyday moment in her life would turn into something so much bigger. But even as the praise poured in, there was a part of Mia that couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief. It wasn't the intervention itself that amazed her, it was the realization that someone like Elon Musk had taken the time to notice her. A person with so much power and influence, someone who had changed the world in so many ways, had chosen to step in and make a difference in her life. She had always believed in the power of small acts of kindness, but never in a million years did she think one could come from someone like him. The next few days were filled with interviews, both in person and over the phone. Local news stations wanted to know her side of the story, and social media blew up with hashtags like #MiaMatters and #ElonStandsWithMia. Mia was overwhelmed, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride deep in her chest. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been judged or overlooked for something they couldn't control. It was about showing the world that kindness and respect should be the baseline for how we treat each other. But the impact of Elon's intervention didn't stop there. One morning, just as Mia was about to start her shift, she received an unexpected email that would change everything. The subject line read, "A new opportunity awaits you," from Elon Musk. She stared at the email for a long time, unsure whether or not she should open it. It seemed too unreal. But the curiosity won out. She clicked on it, her hands shaking slightly. The message was short and to the point. "Mia, your grace and strength have not gone unnoticed. Your story has inspired me, and I'd like to offer you an opportunity to help others who are facing the same struggles you faced. I believe that with your voice and your heart, you can make a real difference. If you're interested, let's discuss how we can make that happen." Mia felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She read the email again, making sure she wasn't imagining things. This couldn't be real. She had to be dreaming. But it wasn't a dream. It was a real opportunity, an opportunity that could change her life, and maybe even the lives of others who felt invisible. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings and phone calls. Elon's team had reached out to discuss an initiative he was working on, an organization focused on supporting people with disabilities, helping them find jobs, build careers, and break through the barriers that society often placed in front of them. The project was still in its early stages, but they needed someone who understood the challenges faced by people with disabilities. Someone who had lived it. Someone like Mia. Her heart raced as she listened to the details of the project. They wanted Mia to be the face of the initiative, to speak about her experiences and help craft a message that would inspire others. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to create something meaningful. A chance to use her voice to make a difference in the world. The idea of it all felt almost impossible to grasp. Mia had always dreamed of making a bigger impact, but she had never imagined that her opportunity would come in this form. Working with Elon Musk, of all people, felt like a fairy tale. But it wasn't a fairy tale, it was real. As she hung up the phone after her final call with Elon's team, Mia sat back and let out a long breath. She couldn't believe how much her life had changed in such a short period of time. From being a coffee shop employee struggling to make ends meet to receiving an offer to work on a life-changing project with one of the most influential people in the world, this was more than she had ever hoped for. But there was one thing that weighed heavily on her mind. As exciting as the opportunity was, Mia knew that it would come with its own set of challenges. She would have to navigate new territory, work with people who were more experienced than her, and step into a spotlight that had always felt out of reach. The pressure was real. Still, Mia knew one thing for sure, she couldn't back down now. This was her chance to make a real difference, not just in her life, but in the lives of countless others who faced similar struggles. She wasn't going to let fear hold her back. She had come too far. And now, she was ready to take the next step. The day Mia was set to meet with Elon Musk and his team felt like a whirlwind. She had spent the last few weeks preparing herself mentally for the journey ahead. There had been interviews, press conferences, and a constant buzz of excitement surrounding her, yet, despite all the attention, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. For once, she wasn't going to let the overwhelming pressure derail her. She arrived at the location, a sleek, modern building in the heart of the city, where Elon's team had set up a series of meetings for potential partnerships. Mia couldn't help but feel a little out of place. She had always been comfortable at Bean and Brew, in the familiar, cozy atmosphere of the cafe. Now, she was in a high-powered corporate environment with people who had more experience and more success than she had ever dreamed of. Her heart raced with anticipation. As Mia walked into the large conference room, she was greeted by Elon himself. He stood up from the table and smiled at her, a gesture that made her feel both incredibly welcomed and, in a strange way, a little overwhelmed. "Mia, it's great to finally meet you in person," he said warmly. "Thank you for having me," she replied, her voice slightly shaky, but filled with a quiet determination. They sat down at the long table, and the meeting began. For the next hour, Mia listened as Elon and his team outlined their vision for the new initiative, a project that aimed to provide job opportunities, mentorship, and resources for individuals with disabilities. The idea was revolutionary, a platform where people like Mia could find meaningful employment, but also one where they could learn to advocate for themselves, break through societal barriers, and discover a world of possibility. As the meeting progressed, Mia found herself growing more and more excited. She could see how much this project could change the lives of so many people, and she could see how much her role in it could make a difference. But there was still a gnawing feeling inside her, a fear that she wasn't enough. That maybe, despite everything, she wasn't the right person for this job. Elon noticed the hesitation in her eyes. He had been watching her closely, sensing her internal struggle. When there was a lull in the conversation, he turned to her, his gaze kind and understanding. "Mia, I can see you're nervous. And that's okay. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You're here because we believe in you. Because we know your story, your heart, and your voice are exactly what this project needs." Mia looked at him, her throat tightening. She had worked so hard her whole life to be seen as capable. To prove to herself, and the world, that she was just as capable as anyone else. But now, faced with this massive opportunity, she feared she might fail. She feared that all of this was just too much for her. I'm just afraid," Mia confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never done anything like this before. I'm not sure I'm ready for all of this." Elon leaned forward slightly, his expression serious yet gentle. "Mia, let me tell you something. Every person who has ever achieved anything meaningful has felt that fear. It's a part of the journey. It's not about being perfect or having all the answers, it's about showing up, being yourself, and doing your best. You've already shown that you have the heart and the strength to make a difference. And that's what matters most." His words hit her like a wave, washing away the doubt and fear that had been clouding her thoughts. It wasn't about being flawless, it was about being authentic. About showing up for herself, and for the people who believed in her. Mia felt a rush of emotion, tears welling in her eyes. It was as though all the years of self-doubt, the insults, and the struggles had culminated in this moment. She had spent so much time trying to prove to others that she was enough, but now, she realized, she needed to believe it herself. The team sat in silence for a moment, allowing Mia the space to gather her thoughts. Then, with newfound clarity, she took a deep breath and looked around the room, her eyes meeting Elon's. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "I want to do this. I want to be a part of something bigger. I want to help people who have felt invisible, just like I did." Elon smiled, the warmth in his eyes matching his words. "I knew you were the right person for this." And in that moment, Mia understood that this wasn't just an opportunity to change her life, it was a chance to help others find their voices, too. She didn't have to do this alone. She had support. She had people who believed in her. And most importantly, she was learning to believe in herself. The meeting continued, and as the hours passed, Mia felt a sense of excitement and purpose she had never known before. She wasn't just a person with Down syndrome anymore. She was a leader, an advocate, and a force for change. And the journey she was about to embark on would be nothing short of extraordinary. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind for Mia. The initial excitement of being chosen for the project quickly gave way to the intense work of getting everything in motion. There were interviews to prepare for, media appearances to schedule, and meetings with the people who would help her bring the vision of the new initiative to life. At times, it felt like the world had sped up, leaving her little time to breathe. But despite the chaos, there was a sense of purpose that drove her forward. For the first time in her life, Mia felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Elon and his team were incredibly supportive, offering guidance and encouragement every step of the way. Mia found herself learning more than she ever expected, not just about the logistics of running a large project, but also about the incredible impact that true advocacy could have on real people. She had always known that she wanted to help others, but now, she was seeing firsthand how small actions could lead to big changes. The project's official launch was just around the corner, and the pressure was mounting. Mia knew this was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment that would define her not only as an individual, but also as someone who could make a real difference in the world. But despite the anticipation, Mia couldn't shake the doubt that still lingered in the back of her mind. What if she wasn't good enough? What if all the hard work didn't pay off? It was during one of these moments of uncertainty that she received a message that would change everything. It was from her mother, who had always been her biggest supporter, but who also shared Mia's fears about the upcoming project. "Remember when you were little and we used to go to the park together," her mother wrote. "You were so afraid to try the monkey bars, but I told you that you could do it. That you just needed to take it one step at a time, and you would get there. You were scared, but you tried anyway. And when you made it to the top, you were so proud of yourself. Mia, this project is your monkey bars. You're scared now, but I know you can do it. Take it one step at a time, and you'll make it. I believe in you, and I'm so proud of you." Reading those words, Mia felt something shift inside her. Her mother was right. She had spent so many years second-guessing herself, but now, she was finally stepping into her potential. She had overcome her fears before. This was no different. As the launch day approached, Mia felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She wasn't doing this alone, she had a support system that believed in her. And most importantly, she was starting to believe in herself. The morning of the launch, Mia woke up early, feeling a mixture of nerves and excitement. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple yet elegant outfit that made her feel confident. As she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair, she smiled. For the first time in a long while, she felt proud of the person she was becoming. She wasn't just someone with Down syndrome anymore. She was a voice for change. She was someone who could make a real difference in the world. When Mia arrived at the event, she was greeted with applause. The room was filled with journalists, advocates, and other individuals who were passionate about creating more inclusive opportunities for people with disabilities. Mia took her seat on the stage, her heart racing in her chest. But as soon as the event began, something remarkable happened. Elon Musk took the stage first, talking about the vision for the initiative and the importance of inclusion. He spoke about the power of empathy, kindness, and action. His words were inspiring, and Mia could feel the energy in the room shift. People were paying attention. This wasn't just another corporate project, it was a movement. Then, it was Mia's turn to speak. When she stood up to address the crowd, her hands trembled slightly, but she knew this was her moment. She took a deep breath and began to speak from the heart. "Thank you all for being here today," she started, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've spent so many years feeling invisible. I've been told that I'm not capable, that I don't belong. But today, I stand here not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever been told they couldn't do something because of who they are. This project is about creating opportunities for all of us. It's about proving that no matter what challenges we face, we have the power to break through and build the life we want. And I'm here today because I believe that together, we can make that happen." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into applause. Mia felt her heart swell with emotion. She had done it. She had overcome her doubts, and she had shown the world her strength. But the most powerful moment came when Elon Musk stood beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "Together, we can change the world." As the event concluded, Mia felt a sense of accomplishment that she had never known before. This was just the beginning of something much bigger than herself. She had made it through the fear, the uncertainty, and the self-doubt. And now, she was ready to take on whatever came next. Mia's journey was far from over. After the successful launch of the initiative, the world seemed to open up in ways she had never imagined. She was invited to speak at conferences, appear on podcasts, and even give motivational talks to schools and organizations. With each opportunity, Mia felt herself growing stronger, more confident, and more certain that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Yet, as much as she thrived in the spotlight, she knew the real work was happening behind the scenes. The project was still in its early stages, and there were countless hurdles to overcome. There were more people to reach, more lives to change, and more barriers to break. It wasn't just about her anymore, it was about creating a lasting impact for people with disabilities everywhere. Every day, Mia worked tirelessly alongside Elon's team, helping to shape the direction of the initiative. She met with policymakers, advocated for better access to resources for individuals with disabilities, and even began working with companies to help them become more inclusive in their hiring practices. At times, the work felt overwhelming. Mia was constantly balancing her role as the face of the project with the demands of her personal life. She still worked part-time at Bean & Brew, a place that had always been a source of comfort for her. It reminded her of where she came from, the quiet mornings spent brewing coffee, the friendships she had made, and the sense of belonging she had felt there. It was a reminder that no matter how far she went, she had to stay grounded. But even in the midst of the whirlwind, Mia knew she had to take care of herself. The pressure to constantly perform, to be the voice for others, was heavy. She was proud of what she had accomplished, but there were moments when she longed for the simplicity of her old life. She missed the quiet moments at home, curled up with a book or watching a movie without the weight of the world on her shoulders. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and interviews, Mia sat down at her favorite spot at Bean & Brew. The cafe was quiet, and the soft hum of the espresso machine was oddly comforting. She sipped her coffee slowly, letting the warmth of the cup soothe her. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. It was a text from her mom. "How are you holding up, sweetie? I'm so proud of everything you've done. Just remember to take care of yourself too. You deserve it." Mia smiled at the message, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. Her mom always knew just what to say. Mia typed back a quick reply, "I'm good, Mom. Just a little tired. But I'll get through it." She put the phone down and gazed out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time in a while, Mia allowed herself to just breathe. It wasn't about the interviews or the press or even the impact she was making, it was about her. The thought made her realize something important: the world would always need people who fought for change, but she couldn't do it alone. Mia had to take time for herself in order to be the best version of herself for others. She needed balance. As the evening wore on, Mia made a promise to herself. She would continue her work with the initiative, but she would also set aside time to enjoy the small moments, the quiet ones. She would return to her roots, to the moments that had given her the strength to get this far. And when the pressure started to feel too much, she would remind herself that it was okay to step back and recharge. After all, she wasn't just an advocate for others. She had to be an advocate for herself, too. A few weeks later, Mia stood on stage at a major conference, ready to deliver one of the most important speeches of her life. She had been invited to speak about the progress of the initiative, but this time, it wasn't just about statistics or success stories, it was about her journey. The personal struggles, the fears, and the triumphs that had led her to this point. As she approached the podium, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had been nervous before every speech she gave, but today, something was different. She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She was speaking for everyone who had ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. She was speaking for those who had been told that they didn't matter. With a deep breath, Mia began. Today, I stand before you, not just as a person with Down syndrome, but as someone who has learned that our stories are our power. Every one of us has a unique journey, one filled with challenges and triumphs, heartbreaks and victories. But it's how we choose to face those moments that define us. We are not defined by what others think of us. We are defined by how we rise up, how we keep pushing forward, no matter the obstacles in our way. Mia paused, looking out at the crowd. She could feel the weight of her words in the room. It was as if everyone was hanging on every sentence. She wasn't just speaking to the crowd, she was speaking to herself too. None of us are alone in this fight. We have each other. And together, we will create a world where everyone has a chance to thrive, no matter what their challenges may be. The crowd erupted into applause, and Mia felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had come a long way. And yet, she knew that this was just the beginning. There were still so many people to reach, so much work to do. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready. As Mia's influence grew, so did the challenges. Despite the overwhelming support for the new initiative, there were still many hurdles to overcome. Public perception was often slow to change, and even some of the companies and individuals Mia had hoped would embrace inclusivity were hesitant or resistant. Mia had been hopeful that people's attitudes would shift quickly once they saw the success stories of individuals with disabilities thriving in the workplace, but it wasn't that simple. It wasn't just about giving people jobs, it was about changing a deeply ingrained mindset that had existed for generations. The idea that people with disabilities were somehow less capable still persisted in many parts of society, and that was something Mia couldn't fix overnight. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she was determined to keep pushing forward. One of the biggest challenges came in the form of a major partnership. A large tech company had agreed to work with Mia's initiative, offering internships and training programs for individuals with disabilities. Mia had been ecstatic when the deal was first made, believing it was a significant step in the right direction. However, when the first cohort of interns arrived at the company, things didn't go as smoothly as expected. The interns were enthusiastic, but many faced challenges in adapting to the corporate environment. The company's management team, while well-intentioned, wasn't fully prepared for the nuances of accommodating individuals with disabilities. There were misunderstandings, communication breakdowns, and a lack of proper resources for the interns. As a result, some of the interns struggled, and the company began to question whether the partnership was worth continuing. Mia felt a deep sense of responsibility for the situation. She had worked so hard to create opportunities for people with disabilities, but now it seemed as though those opportunities were slipping through her fingers. She knew the interns deserved better, but she also understood that true change would take time. This wasn't a failure, it was simply a lesson in the importance of preparation, understanding, and patience. She immediately called a meeting with Elon and the company's leadership team. In the room, the atmosphere was tense. Everyone was feeling the pressure, and no one knew how to fix the situation. Mia could sense the frustration, but she knew she couldn't let this setback derail everything they had worked for. I think the problem is that we're not fully seeing the interns for who they are, Mia began, her voice calm but resolute. We're treating them as if they need to fit into an existing mold, rather than creating a space where they can thrive in their own unique way. We need to be more flexible, more understanding. This is a partnership, and that means we all have to do our part. The company needs to adapt, and the interns need to be supported, not just with training but with patience and encouragement. Elon nodded, his expression thoughtful. You're absolutely right, Mia. We need to rethink our approach, make sure that both sides understand what's expected and how to communicate effectively. We have to create an environment that allows for growth, not just performance. Mia smiled, relieved to have her perspective heard. It wasn't easy to challenge the status quo, especially when so many people were involved in the process, but she knew that speaking up was the only way forward. Let's take a step back, reassess, and build a program that's more inclusive. Let's be proactive, not just reactive. Over the following weeks, Mia and the company worked tirelessly to revamp the program. They brought in specialists to help train the management team on how to create an accessible and supportive environment for interns with disabilities. They implemented new guidelines to ensure that the interns received the accommodations they needed to succeed, from flexible work hours to specialized mentorship. The company also committed to making long-term changes to its hiring practices to ensure that people with disabilities had the opportunity to contribute at every level. Mia watched as the interns began to flourish in their roles. Slowly but surely, they gained confidence, and the company began to see the value they brought to the team. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that was something Mia could be proud of. The experience was a reminder that change was rarely easy. It required persistence, flexibility, and, above all, a willingness to learn from mistakes. Mia knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but she also knew that every obstacle they faced was an opportunity to grow and improve. That evening, Mia took a moment to reflect on the day. She had learned something important. True leadership wasn't just about pushing for change, it was about meeting people where they were, understanding their needs, and guiding them toward a better future, even when the path wasn't clear. She looked out the window at the city lights, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. There was still much work to be done, but Mia was no longer afraid. She was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that with each step, she was making a difference, not just for herself, but for everyone who needed a voice. Mia's journey wasn't just about the triumphs, it was also about the critics. The world wasn't always as welcoming as she had hoped, and not everyone was ready to embrace the changes she and Elon were pushing for. As the initiative gained more attention, so did the scrutiny. Some people were skeptical, questioning whether the resources and support being offered to people with disabilities were truly needed or if they were simply politically correct gestures. Others saw the project as a threat to their own businesses and careers, worried that it would lead to more regulations and demands for diversity and inclusion. Mia had heard whispers. At first, they were small comments from colleagues or random posts online. But soon, the criticism began to intensify. Some people felt that the initiative was pushing too fast or taking resources away from others who deserve it more. Mia knew that these comments were often rooted in ignorance, but it still stung to see them. She had always believed in the power of inclusion, but these opinions made her question whether she could truly change the world. The weight of the project, the responsibility to every individual who counted on her, felt heavier than ever. What if she was wrong? What if people with disabilities didn't need the kind of support she was advocating for? The doubt was insidious, and it crept into her mind during the quiet moments. One evening, Mia sat at her desk at home, reading through an article that seemed to criticize everything she stood for. She felt the familiar pang of frustration rise in her chest, followed by a wave of self-doubt. It felt as though the world was telling her she wasn't good enough, that her ideas were too ambitious. Elon had always encouraged Mia to stay focused on the bigger picture, but in that moment, Mia wasn't sure she could. She had worked so hard to make this initiative a success, but was she doing the right thing? Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from her mom. "I know you're probably feeling overwhelmed right now, but remember why you started. You've always had a heart for helping others, and you've made a difference in so many lives already. Don't let anyone's words define you. You are doing important work, and the world needs your voice." Mia took a deep breath and smiled at the message. Her mom's words reminded her that she wasn't in this alone. Her vision was bigger than the opinions of others. She was changing lives, and that was worth every ounce of effort, no matter how many people disagreed. The next day, Mia decided to take a step back and reassess. Rather than letting the negative voices take over, she focused on the stories of success. She revisited the lives of the individuals whose futures had been transformed by the initiative. She remembered their faces, the moments when they had found their confidence, their sense of purpose, their belonging. These were the reasons she couldn't give up. She met with Elon to discuss the growing criticisms. He listened patiently, his expression thoughtful, before offering his perspective. "Everyone's going to have an opinion," Elon said. "But you can't let that stop you. You know what's right, Mia. The work you're doing is important, don't let the noise drown out the impact you're making. We're not doing this for the critics, we're doing it for the people who need this support." His words sparked something inside Mia. She realized that the criticism was inevitable, every movement, every idea that challenged the status quo would face opposition. The key wasn't to avoid it but to rise above it, to stay true to the mission, and to keep pushing forward with even more determination. With renewed confidence, Mia went public with a speech about the initiative. She shared the challenges and the criticisms, but most importantly, she reminded people of why the project mattered. She spoke directly to the skeptics, asking them to consider the lives they were affecting and the people who had been overlooked for far too long. "We're not asking for handouts," Mia said in her speech. "We're asking for opportunities. The chance to work, to contribute, and to be seen. People with disabilities have value, talent, and ambition just like anyone else. The world can only be better when we give everyone the chance to be part of it." Her words resonated with many, and the support for the initiative grew even stronger. Mia realized that the criticisms would always be there, but the love and gratitude from the people who believed in her work would always outweigh the negativity. A few days later, Mia received a message from one of the interns who had benefited from the initiative. The intern, a young woman named Lily, had been working at a tech startup that was a partner in the program. Lily shared a heartfelt message with Mia, thanking her for the opportunity. "Before I joined the program, I never believed I could work in a place like this. I was always told I wasn't good enough. But now, I'm leading a team on a project. I never thought this would be my life. You've changed my future, Mia. Thank you." Mia wiped away a tear as she read the message. This was why she did it. This was why she couldn't stop. As Mia's initiative gained momentum, so did the complexity of her role. What began as a small idea to create opportunities for people with disabilities was now a full-fledged movement, one that was changing not just the workplace, but entire communities. The impact was undeniable, and Mia had become a symbol of hope for countless individuals who had long been overlooked. But with success came new challenges. More and more companies expressed interest in partnering with Mia's initiative, and with each new collaboration, the pressure increased. Mia was no longer just managing a single project, she was overseeing a vast network of partnerships, each requiring attention, strategy, and careful planning. Despite the growing responsibilities, Mia remained deeply committed to the cause. She was determined to ensure that the initiative stayed true to its original mission, to create lasting change for people with disabilities, to break down the barriers that had long kept them from reaching their full potential. However, Mia began to feel the weight of the expectations placed on her shoulders. She was constantly juggling meetings, interviews, and speaking engagements, all while trying to keep her personal life intact. The constant hustle was taking a toll on her health, both physically and mentally. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Mia found herself lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling. The exhaustion was overwhelming. She loved what she was doing, but there were times when it felt like there was no room left for her. She hadn't had a day off in weeks, and the pressure was beginning to feel suffocating. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Elon. "Mia, I know you're burning the candle at both ends, but don't forget to take care of yourself. We're all in this together, and you don't have to carry the weight alone. Let's take some time to regroup and reassess. Mia stared at the message for a long time. It was a reminder that she didn't have to do everything on her own. Elon had been more than a business partner, he had become a mentor, a friend, and someone who truly understood the challenges she faced. But the message also made Mia realize something important: she needed to slow down and take a step back before she burned out. The next morning, Mia took a bold step. She called her team and informed them that she would be taking a few days off to recharge. It wasn't easy for her to admit that she needed a break. She had always been the one pushing forward, never stopping to rest. But Mia knew that if she was going to continue making a difference, she had to take care of herself first. During her time off, Mia focused on finding balance. She spent time with her family, reconnected with old friends, and allowed herself to indulge in the simple pleasures that had once brought her joy, like reading a book, going for long walks, and enjoying a quiet cup of coffee at Bean and Brew. As the days passed, Mia felt the tension slowly begin to lift. She realized how much she had been neglecting her own well-being in the pursuit of her mission. But now, with a renewed sense of energy and clarity, she was ready to return to the work that mattered most to her. When Mia returned to her team, she was more focused than ever. She had learned a valuable lesson: the fight for change was a marathon, not a sprint. And in order to run the race, she had to take care of herself first. With this newfound perspective, Mia and her team began to take a more strategic approach to their partnerships. They prioritized quality over quantity, focusing on the companies and organizations that truly shared their values and were committed to long-term change. One of the key milestones in their journey was a collaboration with a major international corporation that had long been criticized for its lack of diversity. The company had approached Mia's initiative with the desire to improve its hiring practices and create more opportunities for people with disabilities. But Mia and her team knew that this would require a complete overhaul of the company's structure and culture. It wasn't going to be easy. There were entrenched attitudes to overcome, and the company's leadership was initially resistant to change. But Mia was undeterred. She saw this as an opportunity to truly make an impact on a global scale, and she wasn't going to let fear or resistance stop her. Through months of meetings, discussions, and hard work, the company began to slowly shift. They implemented new training programs, developed inclusive hiring practices, and provided employees with the resources they needed to succeed. The change was gradual, but it was real. And it was proof that even the largest organizations could evolve when they were willing to make the effort. As Mia stood in front of the company's leadership team, reflecting on the progress they had made, she felt a deep sense of pride. She had helped guide them through the process of transformation, and now they were leading the way in creating a more inclusive future. But Mia knew this was only the beginning. There were still so many more companies to reach, so many more barriers to break. And with each new victory, she became more determined to see the mission through. She had come a long way, but there was still work to be done. And this time, she was ready to tackle it with the strength and clarity that came from taking care of herself first. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one step you've taken to prioritize your own well-being while pursuing your goals? As Mia's initiative continued to grow, the impact was becoming increasingly visible, not just within the companies that partnered with her, but in the lives of the individuals whose futures were being transformed. The stories of success were pouring in, from people who had been hired for the first time, to others who had risen within their organizations, proving that people with disabilities were capable of much more than the world had given them credit for. The ripple effect of the initiative was far-reaching. Media outlets began covering the story, and soon, other countries were reaching out, eager to learn from Mia's model. What had started as a local project was now a global movement, one that was slowly but surely changing the way people viewed disability in the workplace. But for Mia, it was always about the people, the interns, the employees, the families, whose lives had been directly impacted by the work they were doing. One of the most powerful moments came when Mia received a letter from a mother whose son had participated in the initiative. The letter read. Dear Mia. Before joining your program, my son, Jordan, was told by everyone that he would never be able to hold a job. He struggled with his confidence, and so did I, watching him feel so alone in a world that didn't seem to want him. But since he joined the program, everything has changed. He's now working as a junior developer at a tech company, and more than that, he's thriving. He's making friends, and he finally believes in himself. You've given him the gift of a future, and for that, I can never thank you enough. Reading the letter, Mia couldn't help but tear up. This was the kind of change she had always dreamed of, a change that was personal, real, and life-altering. It was moments like these that reminded her of why she kept pushing forward, despite the obstacles and setbacks. But as the impact of the initiative grew, so did the scrutiny. There were still people who believed that the focus on hiring individuals with disabilities was misguided. Some argued that companies were hiring people out of obligation rather than a genuine desire to diversify, and that the initiative was simply another corporate trend. Mia knew that these criticisms were part of the process. Change was hard, and people resisted it when it threatened their comfort zones. But she was undeterred. She wasn't interested in following trends, she was focused on creating lasting impact. The question wasn't whether the initiative was popular or not, it was about whether it was changing lives for the better. One of the challenges that arose was with a company that had recently joined the program. The company had initially agreed to the partnership but had not fully committed to the necessary changes to make the program successful. Mia had received reports that some of the employees with disabilities were not being given the support they needed, and there was a sense of resistance from certain managers who didn't understand the value of inclusivity. Mia knew that she couldn't let this slide. She couldn't let anyone fall through the cracks, not when the whole initiative was built on the belief that every person deserved a fair shot. She called an emergency meeting with the company's leadership, including the CEO. Elon joined her for support, and together, they walked into the room, prepared to have a difficult conversation. The CEO of the company was a man named William, who had been hesitant about fully embracing the changes required by the initiative. His tone was polite but defensive as he greeted Mia and Elon. Mia, Elon, I appreciate you both coming to speak with me. But I must say, we're not sure if the program is a fit for us. We're getting some pushback from certain teams, and it's become a bit difficult to manage. Mia looked at William, her voice steady. I understand that change can be difficult, William. But this isn't just about making people feel comfortable, it's about creating opportunities that are real and meaningful. If the program isn't working the way it should, we need to identify the barriers and fix them. Our goal isn't just to give people jobs, it's to create an environment where they can thrive. Elon spoke up, adding, I think the problem is that we're not fully integrating people with disabilities into the culture. We need a top-down commitment to inclusion, not just surface-level adjustments. William hesitated, and for a moment, it felt as though the conversation might not go anywhere. But then, something shifted. Mia's words had struck a chord. I understand now, William said, his voice quieter. I didn't realize the depth of what you were asking. It's more than just offering jobs, it's about changing our entire mindset. We haven't been fully invested in the way we should be, and I see that now. Mia smiled, relieved. It's not easy. It takes time. But if we work together, we can make it work. And the benefits will be far greater than we could imagine. Over the next few weeks, the company took significant steps toward making the necessary changes. They implemented new training for all employees, emphasizing the value of diversity and inclusion at every level. They created mentorship programs specifically for employees with disabilities and worked to ensure that the workplace was truly accessible and supportive. As the weeks went by, the company began to see the results. The employees with disabilities became integral members of the team, offering new perspectives and innovative solutions to problems. The resistance that had once existed within the company began to fade as the leadership team embraced the importance of inclusion. Mia knew that this was just one success story in a much larger journey, but it was a significant victory nonetheless. The ripple effect was spreading, and it was clear that the work they were doing was changing the landscape of business and employment for people with disabilities. With each challenge they faced, Mia and her team grew stronger and more determined. They knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but they were ready to face whatever came next, knowing that they were making a difference, one life at a time. As Mia's initiative continued to take shape, the team realized that the success of the program wasn't just about creating job opportunities, it was about creating an ecosystem where individuals could grow, learn, and thrive. And for that, mentorship was key. One of the core principles of the program had always been to provide not just a job, but a platform for growth. People with disabilities needed more than a role, they needed guidance, support, and someone who could help them navigate the professional world. Without mentorship, even the most talented individuals could find themselves struggling to advance in their careers. Mia had seen firsthand the transformative power of mentorship in her own life. Early on, she had found guidance from several individuals who had helped her shape her vision and navigate the complexities of running a large-scale initiative. Now, she was determined to pay that forward, ensuring that every participant in her program had access to mentors who could help them reach their full potential. Elon, ever the advocate for innovation, agreed to help in any way he could. He understood that mentorship wasn't just about offering advice, it was about creating a partnership where both mentor and mentee could learn and grow together. Together, Mia and Elon began reaching out to their network of professionals, asking for their support in the form of mentorship. The response was overwhelming. Top executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals from various industries were eager to lend a hand. They understood the significance of what Mia was trying to accomplish, and they were willing to invest their time and knowledge in the next generation of talent. One of the first ments to benefit from this program was a young man named Jamal. Jamal had struggled for years to find meaningful work due to his disability. Despite his immense potential and skills, he had always been overlooked. After joining Mia's initiative, he was paired with Sarah, a senior executive at a major tech firm who had been one of the first to volunteer as a mentor. From the very first meeting, Jamal felt a sense of hope he had never experienced before. Sarah didn't just offer him advice, she actively listened to his goals, his fears, and his dreams. Together, they worked on developing his skills, building his confidence, and navigating the challenges of working in a competitive industry. "Sarah, I never thought someone like me would get the chance to work at a company like this," Jamal said one day, his voice filled with gratitude. "I've always been told that my disability would hold me back, that I wasn't good enough. But you've shown me that I have something valuable to offer." Sarah smiled warmly, her eyes shining with pride. "You do, Jamal. And I'm here to help you realize that every step of the way. You have a bright future ahead of you, and I'm honored to be a part of it." As Jamal's confidence grew, so did his success. He became a star employee at his company, contributing innovative ideas and leading key projects. His relationship with Sarah continued to blossom, and he was soon mentoring others who had faced similar challenges. The impact of mentorship extended far beyond Jamal. Over time, dozens of individuals in the program benefited from the guidance of their mentors. Each success story fueled the next, creating a powerful network of professionals with disabilities who were not just surviving, but thriving in the workplace. But mentorship wasn't just about one-on-one relationships. Mia and Elon soon realized that the broader community needed to be engaged in the process. They organized workshops, seminars, and networking events where ments could meet a diverse range of professionals, learn from their experiences, and build lasting connections. These events were transformative. They allowed participants to see what was possible when they had the right support and resources. They also helped break down the stigma surrounding disability in the workplace, showing employers that hiring individuals with disabilities was not just a nice thing to do, but a smart business decision that brought innovation, diversity, and new perspectives to the table. Mia watched as the initiative grew into something much bigger than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about changing the way businesses hired, it was about creating an entire ecosystem where people with disabilities had the tools, resources, and mentorship they needed to succeed in any industry. One afternoon, as Mia sat in a meeting with Elon, they discussed the next steps for the program. The success they had seen so far was incredible, but there was still so much more to do. "Elon, we're at a turning point," Mia said. "This is more than just a program. It's a movement. And if we want to continue changing lives, we need to think bigger. We need to scale this, create more opportunities for mentorship, and ensure that the ecosystem we've built is sustainable for the long term." Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with ideas. "I think you're right, Mia. We've built a solid foundation, but now we need to expand. We can partner with universities, start mentorship programs in high schools, and create a pipeline of talent that reaches all corners of society. The impact we can make is limitless." Mia nodded, her heart swelling with excitement. She knew this was just the beginning. They had created something powerful, a network of people with disabilities who were no longer content to stay on the sidelines. They were taking charge of their futures, with the guidance and support of mentors who believed in them. With each new mentor-mentee pair, the ripple effect grew stronger. And Mia knew that the work she was doing, alongside Elon and countless others, was changing the future, one person at a time. The momentum Mia had cultivated with her initiative had reached a tipping point. What started as a local project aimed at empowering individuals with disabilities had turned into something far more significant. The ripple effect she and Elon had set in motion was spreading like wildfire, and now, people around the world were taking notice. International media outlets began covering the program, showcasing the inspiring stories of success and the companies that were leading the charge in inclusivity. Articles, interviews, and documentaries appeared, featuring both employees with disabilities and the business leaders who had made it their mission to create accessible, inclusive workplaces. Mia was invited to speak at global conferences, panel discussions, and forums dedicated to disability rights and workplace inclusion. Each time she stood before an audience, she found herself filled with an overwhelming sense of purpose. She knew that what they had built was only the beginning. This wasn't just a trend, this was a movement that would redefine the future of work. It wasn't long before governments in several countries reached out to Mia's team, asking how they could implement similar programs within their own national workforce strategies. From Canada to the United Kingdom, from Australia to parts of Asia, leaders were eager to learn how they could provide more equitable opportunities for individuals with disabilities. In response, Mia and Elon created a global framework, a set of best practices, resources, and tools that could be adapted to different cultures and industries. It wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution, but rather a flexible model that allowed each country to make the program their own, based on local needs and challenges. One of the first countries to embrace the initiative was Sweden, a country already known for its progressive social policies. The Swedish government saw the value in Mia's model and pledged to roll it out nationwide. Mia traveled to Stockholm to meet with officials and to learn about the specific needs of the Swedish workforce. During her visit, she had the chance to meet with several local businesses that were already leading the way in inclusivity. One of them was a major tech company, Syntec, which had partnered with Mia's initiative to hire individuals with disabilities. The CEO of Syntec, Anna Lindqvist, was passionate about creating a diverse workforce. "Mia, we've always known that diversity is essential for innovation. But what we've seen with this program is something extraordinary. We're not just giving people jobs, we're tapping into an untapped source of talent that has so much to offer," Anna said during their meeting. Mia couldn't help but smile. This was the kind of response she had dreamed of, companies truly understanding the long-term value of inclusivity. Syntec wasn't just hiring for the sake of fulfilling a corporate social responsibility requirement, they were investing in the future of their business and the world. As Mia spent more time in Sweden, she saw firsthand how the country's strong social infrastructure allowed for a smoother integration of individuals with disabilities into the workforce. There were challenges, of course, but the political will to create change was palpable. She knew that if Sweden could successfully implement this model, other countries would follow suit. In the United Kingdom, another major breakthrough occurred. The government had passed new legislation requiring companies to set diversity and inclusion targets, and Mia's initiative was at the forefront of that push. The Ministry of Labour invited Mia to London to help consult on the development of these policies. She worked closely with key officials to ensure that people with disabilities weren't just an afterthought but an integral part of the diversity conversation. Elon, ever the visionary, was determined to make this initiative more than just a business model. He saw it as a way to revolutionize the future of work, creating a space where talent, regardless of ability, was recognized for its value. Mia, we're not just changing the way businesses think about hiring, Elon told her during one of their strategy sessions. We're laying the groundwork for a more inclusive world. What we're doing now will influence how future generations approach disability, not just in the workplace, but in every aspect of life. Mia agreed. This wasn't just about the companies hiring people with disabilities, it was about dismantling the societal barriers that had kept them on the periphery for so long. She had always believed that true change required a fundamental shift in how people saw the world and the individuals in it. The more they worked together, the more they realized that their vision was becoming a reality. The program was expanding exponentially, and Mia's team was growing to keep up with the demand. They needed more mentors, more partners, and more allies to support the hundreds of individuals eager to join the workforce. Mia knew that the next step in the journey would be crucial. They had to ensure that this wasn't just a trend, a flash-in-the-pan initiative that would lose steam once the media attention faded. She wanted this to be a lasting transformation, something that would continue to evolve and grow for generations to come. She began to turn her attention to the next phase of the initiative, scaling it even further. They would need to engage with larger companies, global corporations, and industry leaders to ensure that inclusive hiring wasn't just a niche but a standard practice. And that's when the idea hit her, a global summit on workplace inclusion. A place where leaders, employees, and advocates from all over the world could come together to share ideas, discuss challenges, and collaborate on solutions. Elon loved the idea. We need to create a space where all of these different initiatives can converge and learn from each other, he said. This could be the event that changes everything. The first Global Inclusion Summit was held in New York City, and it was a massive success. The summit attracted hundreds of companies, non-profit organizations, policymakers, and individuals with disabilities from all corners of the globe. There were keynote speeches from influential figures, breakout sessions focused on various aspects of inclusion, and panel discussions that brought together a diverse range of voices. Mia had never been more proud. She stood before the audience during the closing remarks, reflecting on everything they had accomplished. "We've come so far," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "But this is just the beginning. We've started a movement, and together, we will continue to break down the barriers that have held people with disabilities back for far too long." As she looked out over the crowd, Mia realized that they had done more than create jobs. They had sparked a global conversation, one that would continue to grow, evolve, and change the way the world thought about disability, diversity, and opportunity. The success of the Global Inclusion Summit proved that a significant shift was taking place, but Mia knew there was still a long road ahead. One of the biggest challenges in creating lasting change was tackling the stigma surrounding disability in the workplace. While many companies had embraced inclusive hiring practices, there were still pervasive misconceptions about the abilities of individuals with disabilities, particularly in highly competitive industries like tech, finance, and healthcare. Mia and Elon had always known that the real change wouldn't come from just hiring people with disabilities, it would come from transforming how people viewed those with disabilities. To create a truly inclusive world, they had to break down the biases that existed in the workplace and society. Mia decided to take on this challenge head-on. She and her team worked closely with industry leaders to design an awareness campaign aimed at shattering the myths and stereotypes surrounding people with disabilities. The campaign, titled "Abilities Beyond Labels," would feature real stories of individuals who had excelled in their careers, despite facing significant obstacles. Mia reached out to a diverse group of individuals from the initiative's network, employees, mentors, business leaders, to participate in the campaign. She wanted to showcase the wide variety of talents and skills that people with disabilities brought to the table. The campaign would not only highlight their professional successes but also humanize their experiences, giving the public a chance to connect on a personal level. The first video in the campaign featured Olivia, a young woman with cerebral palsy who had recently joined a major consulting firm. Olivia was a brilliant strategist, known for her ability to think outside the box and develop innovative solutions to complex problems. But in the past, she had struggled to find work because employers viewed her disability as a barrier, rather than an opportunity to bring a unique perspective to the table. In the video, Olivia shared her story candidly. She spoke about the challenges she faced growing up, the discrimination she encountered, and the constant need to prove herself. But she also shared her triumphs, the moments when she defied expectations and proved that her disability didn't define her worth. "It's not about what I can't do," Olivia said in the video. "It's about what I can do, and how I can help others see the value in what I bring. I'm not just a consultant, I'm someone who brings fresh perspectives, new ideas, and an unwavering commitment to making a difference." The video quickly went viral. People from all over the world reached out to express their support, and many companies began reassessing their own hiring practices. Olivia's story, along with others in the campaign, demonstrated that individuals with disabilities were not just capable of performing tasks, they were often capable of doing things better, simply because they approached problems from a different angle. The "Abilities Beyond Labels" campaign sparked a larger conversation about how society defines success. People began to question the traditional metrics of ability and began focusing on the unique strengths and perspectives that individuals with disabilities brought to the workplace. It wasn't about perfection or fitting into a mold, it was about embracing diversity and recognizing the value in different ways of thinking. Mia watched as the campaign gained traction. But even as the message spread, she knew that the real work was happening behind the scenes. She and her team continued to meet with businesses, advocating for systemic changes that would support the long-term success of people with disabilities. They focused on educating companies about the importance of providing reasonable accommodations, accessible technology, and inclusive policies. At one of their meetings, Mia met with David, the CEO of a large multinational corporation. David had always been a strong supporter of diversity, but he admitted that he had never considered how disability fit into that conversation. "Mia, I'll be honest," David said, looking a little sheepish. "I've been so focused on race, gender, and age diversity that I never really thought about disability inclusion. I'm starting to realize that we're missing out on a whole pool of talented individuals." Mia smiled, relieved to see the shift in David's perspective. "It's a common oversight, David. But once you start seeing the value of disability inclusion, it becomes clear that it's not just about doing the right thing, it's about building a stronger, more innovative company." David nodded thoughtfully. "I'm committed to changing that here. Let's make sure that our hiring processes are accessible to everyone, and let's ensure that our workplace is truly inclusive for all employees." Mia's heart swelled with pride. Moments like these were proof that their work was having a real impact. As more CEOs like David began to understand the value of disability inclusion, the stigma surrounding disability in the workplace began to erode. But Mia knew that change couldn't be achieved solely through top-down approaches. Grassroots movements were just as important. In schools, universities, and local communities, people needed to understand that disability wasn't a weakness, it was just another part of what made individuals unique. To help foster this understanding, Mia partnered with educational organizations to develop resources for schools and universities. The goal was to teach young people about the importance of inclusion and to provide them with the tools they needed to become allies for people with disabilities. In one of the educational workshops, Mia addressed a group of university students studying business. She shared stories of her journey and talked about the challenges faced by individuals with disabilities in the workforce. "You all have the power to shape the future of work," she said, addressing the students. "The way you approach disability today will determine the kind of world we live in tomorrow. Don't let preconceived notions limit your thinking. Embrace the differences, because those differences are where the real magic happens." The students were inspired. Many of them reached out afterward, eager to get involved in initiatives that promoted disability inclusion. Some even started their own advocacy groups on campus. As the movement continued to grow, Mia realized that they were not just changing the way businesses hired, they were changing the way society as a whole viewed disability. They had created a new narrative, one where disability was no longer something to be feared or pitted, but something to be celebrated and embraced. But Mia knew that this fight was far from over. There was still so much to be done. The stigma wasn't completely gone, and many people with disabilities still faced barriers to entry in the workforce. But Mia and her team had made enormous strides, and they were determined to continue pushing forward, breaking down the stigma one story, one company, and one person at a time. As the years passed, the ripple effect of the global movement Mia and Elon had ignited continued to reverberate throughout the world. Businesses, schools, governments, and individuals were taking more deliberate steps to embrace inclusivity. The "Abilities Beyond Labels" campaign had not only changed how people with disabilities were perceived but had created a new standard for what it meant to be truly inclusive. Yet, Mia knew that despite all the progress, there were still significant challenges ahead. The real test was not just about creating opportunities for individuals with disabilities, it was about ensuring that they could thrive in those environments and that the systems in place truly supported their long-term success. Mia and her team began to see an increasing number of individuals with disabilities entering the workforce, but there were still gaps. The systems designed to support them were often lacking in resources and understanding. For example, many companies had made the commitment to hire inclusively, but the question of how to ensure that employees with disabilities received the training, mentorship, and development opportunities they needed to succeed remained largely unanswered. To address this, Mia developed a new initiative called Beyond the Hire, focused on offering comprehensive support for both employees with disabilities and their employers. The program was designed to go beyond the hiring process, providing mentorship, job coaching, and ongoing education to help individuals with disabilities grow and advance in their careers. Mia reached out to a number of organizations to partner with her on this initiative, including nonprofits that supported disability services, universities with programs for people with disabilities, and companies that had already embraced inclusive hiring practices. Together, they developed a holistic model that not only matched people with disabilities to appropriate jobs but also provided the necessary tools to help them thrive once they were in those positions. The Beyond the Hire initiative gained traction quickly. One of the early adopters was a global tech giant, Silicon Edge, which had recently joined Mia's movement. The CEO, John Bradley, had been one of the first to participate in the Abilities Beyond Labels campaign and had been vocal about his commitment to creating a truly inclusive workforce. Now, he saw the importance of ensuring that individuals with disabilities didn't just get hired, but were given every opportunity to succeed. "This is what we've been missing," John said during their first meeting about the initiative. "We've made great strides with our hiring practices, but we need to ensure that our employees with disabilities have the support and resources they need to thrive long-term. It's not enough to just check the box." Mia couldn't have agreed more. Exactly. Hiring is only the first step. We need to create a pipeline for success, ensuring that people with disabilities have access to career development opportunities, mentorship, and an environment that supports them to reach their full potential. Silicon Edge became one of the flagship companies for the Beyond the Hire program, implementing new policies to support employees with disabilities. The company provided mentorship programs, accessibility training, and leadership development opportunities, ensuring that employees with disabilities were positioned for success and growth. Soon, other companies began following Silicon Edge's lead. One of the employees who benefited from this program was Peter, a talented software engineer with ADHD. Peter had always struggled in traditional work environments, where rigid structures and deadlines made it difficult for him to succeed. But under Silicon Edge's new inclusive approach, he found the support he needed to thrive. Peter was paired with a mentor, a senior engineer who had a background in neurodiversity advocacy. Together, they worked on strategies to adapt the work environment to Peter's strengths. Instead of focusing on the areas where Peter struggled, the team built on his natural problem-solving skills, allowing him to approach projects from unique angles. Peter's success story was widely shared within the company, becoming an example of how supporting employees with disabilities not only helped them succeed but also benefited the company as a whole. His work was recognized, and he was given more opportunities to lead projects, becoming a vocal advocate for the program. As the success stories grew, more and more companies jumped on board. The Beyond the Hire initiative began to take shape as a global movement. Mia, Elon, and their team found themselves working with corporations, non-profit organizations, and governments around the world to ensure that people with disabilities were not just included but were empowered to succeed. But even with the widespread adoption of inclusive practices, there were still some companies that struggled to fully embrace the shift. Mia knew that in order to create lasting change, they had to change the narrative even further, shifting the conversation from simply hiring more people with disabilities to fundamentally altering the structures that hindered their success. Mia focused her efforts on one of the most stubborn barriers, the lack of accessible leadership roles for individuals with disabilities. While there were many entry-level positions open to people with disabilities, the path to executive leadership was still largely closed off. This was the next frontier in the inclusivity movement. Mia teamed up with Elon to create a mentorship program for individuals with disabilities that would specifically focus on preparing them for leadership roles. The program, called Leading the Way, was designed to pair promising candidates with executives in senior leadership positions, providing them with the mentorship, resources, and experiences needed to break through the barriers that often existed at the highest levels of business. Through Leading the Way, individuals like Olivia, the consultant from earlier, began to rise through the ranks. As Olivia advanced, she became one of the first high-level leaders with a disability at a major multinational company. She was an outspoken advocate for disability rights in the workplace and used her position to mentor others and create new policies that prioritized inclusion. As more individuals with disabilities took on leadership roles, Mia began to see a profound shift in how companies operated. The change was no longer coming from the top down, it was becoming a part of the corporate culture. When leaders with disabilities made decisions, they brought a new perspective that shaped the direction of the company in ways that were innovative and inclusive. As the Beyond the Hire program flourished, and more people with disabilities advanced into leadership, Mia found herself reflecting on the journey. She had come a long way since the early days of fighting for basic workplace inclusion. Now, they were creating a world where people with disabilities weren't just participants in the workforce, they were leaders shaping the future. In the quiet moments between meetings and speeches, Mia took a deep breath and thought about how far they had come. It was a movement she had helped build from the ground up, a movement that was now transforming the very foundation of how the world thought about work, leadership, and human potential. As much as the success of the Beyond the Hire initiative and the Leading the Way program thrilled Mia, the journey was far from smooth. For every milestone they achieved, there were roadblocks that felt insurmountable at times. The more inclusive practices spread, the more resistance they encountered from those who felt threatened by change. These individuals often disguised their opposition as concerns over cost, productivity, or the potential for disruption. Mia began to notice a troubling trend. Some companies, despite their initial enthusiasm for inclusivity, began to retreat from their commitments. Instead of embracing the full spectrum of support that individuals with disabilities needed, they opted for more superficial measures, like token hiring or hiring individuals for low-wage, low-skill positions. They continued to perpetuate the idea that people with disabilities could only perform menial tasks, thereby perpetuating a cycle of limited opportunities. Mia knew she couldn't let that slide. She had seen the impact of these programs firsthand and knew that real change required a deep, unwavering commitment. But it wasn't just about the companies, it was also about the individuals who were being overlooked, those whose talents were being squandered due to systemic prejudice. One day, after a series of disappointing meetings with corporate partners who were backing out of their commitments, Mia found herself feeling frustrated. As she sat in her office staring at a report of company withdrawals from the Beyond the Hire initiative, she sighed heavily. She'd seen this pattern before, the pressure to conform to outdated norms, the hesitation to fully embrace disability inclusion out of fear of failure. Why do we always have to fight so hard? Mia muttered to herself. Why is this so hard to accept? Her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Elon. Meet me in 20 minutes. We need to talk. Mia didn't have to ask why. She knew exactly what it meant. Elon had been receiving reports of similar setbacks. Their movement was under fire, and it wasn't just from businesses. Some political groups had started to voice concerns that disability inclusion was costing them money that could be better spent elsewhere. Mia quickly grabbed her things and headed to Elon's office. When she walked in, Elon was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline with his hands clasped behind his back. He turned as she entered, his face drawn and serious. I've just finished speaking with several partners, Elon began, his voice quiet. I'm hearing the same thing everywhere. Resistance is building. Some of them are pulling out of the initiatives completely. They claim it's becoming too costly, too complicated. Some even think it's creating more problems than it solves. Mia felt a knot form in her stomach. It had always been a battle to prove the value of the movement, but this felt different. The momentum they had built over the years was slipping, and with it, so was the hope that true inclusivity would ever be achieved. Do you think they're right? Mia asked softly, trying to hold back the lump in her throat. Elon exhaled deeply. I don't know. What I do know is that we've made progress, and we can't lose sight of that. Yes, there are setbacks. Yes, the resistance is louder now. But we've created something that matters. If we back down now, we'll be sending the wrong message. That's not an option. Mia nodded, steeling herself. So, what do we do? Elon met her gaze with a steely determination. We double down. We show them why we're not going anywhere. We have the data. We have the success stories. And we have the people who believe in us. But we need to take a new approach. We can't just rely on companies to get it right, we need to get everyone involved, government leaders, public advocates, even the media. We need to make this about society, not just the workforce. This is a civil rights issue, not a diversity issue. Mia felt a fire rekindle within her. She knew Elon was right. If they didn't push harder now, they risked losing all the progress they had made. They were on the cusp of a tipping point, and it would take everything they had to keep the momentum going. I'm with you, Mia said, her voice filled with conviction. Let's take this to the next level. Let's make them see that this isn't just a business trend, it's the future of our society. It's a future where everyone can contribute, where everyone has a seat at the table. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of action. Mia, Elon, and their teams worked tirelessly to pivot their strategy. They launched a new awareness campaign called Disability is a Strength, which emphasized the broader societal benefits of inclusion, rather than just the bottom-line financial aspects that many businesses focused on. This campaign was designed to show that people with disabilities brought unparalleled skills, innovation, and resilience to society. It was no longer just about jobs, it was about reshaping the narrative around what it meant to be truly inclusive. The campaign featured powerful testimonials from employees with disabilities who had not only excelled in their careers but had become instrumental in solving some of the world's most pressing challenges. From healthcare innovations to breakthroughs in tech, these individuals were making a profound impact in their industries. One of the featured stories was of Benjamin, a young man with autism who had revolutionized a global tech company's approach to cybersecurity. His ability to spot patterns and anticipate threats had saved the company millions of dollars. But Benjamin had also struggled in traditional work environments. With the right accommodations, however, his brilliance had shone through, and now he was leading a team of experts on projects critical to national security. The media began to take notice. The campaign went viral, sparking discussions not just in the workplace but in homes and communities around the world. Social media platforms exploded with #DisabilityIsAStrength, and people shared their own stories of how individuals with disabilities had positively impacted their lives or businesses. As the campaign gained momentum, Elon used his influence to meet with key political figures, advocating for legislation that would support disability inclusion in all sectors, not just the workplace. It wasn't just about hiring practices anymore. It was about building a society that valued the contributions of every individual, regardless of ability. For the first time in months, Mia felt a sense of hope that they could win this fight. The public was shifting, and with each new ally, they were getting closer to the tipping point where disability inclusion wasn't just a buzzword, it was a way of life. The wave of momentum they had built in the previous weeks was undeniable. Media outlets, business leaders, and even grassroots organizations had begun to align themselves with Mia's vision. Yet, despite the campaign's success, a small group of influential individuals still remained unconvinced. They were the staunch skeptics, those who believed that inclusivity was an overhyped trend that ultimately slowed down progress. The resistance had become more organized, and it threatened to derail everything they had worked for. It was during one of these high-stakes meetings that Mia received an unexpected phone call that would forever alter the course of their movement. "Mia, it's Elon. You need to take this call. It's from someone you wouldn't expect. He insists it's urgent." Mia's curiosity piqued. "Who is it?" "You'll see," Elon replied cryptically before hanging up. Minutes later, her phone rang again, and a voice on the other end stunned her. "This is Sam Thompson. I'm calling because I want to help." Mia blinked in disbelief. Sam Thompson was one of the most prominent figures in the world of business strategy. He was known for being fiercely conservative, a businessman whose primary focus was on the bottom line. He had a reputation for prioritizing profit over anything else, even when it came to employee welfare. Mia had heard his name tossed around in some of the corporate boardrooms that had resisted her initiatives. "You want to help with what, exactly?" Mia replied, still skeptical. "I've been following your campaign," Sam said. "And I have to admit, I was wrong. I thought you were just another idealist chasing after something that couldn't work. But the truth is, your movement is having a real impact. And that's why I'm reaching out. I want to be part of the solution." Mia was quiet for a moment, processing his words. She had always known that change came with its fair share of challenges, but to hear a man like Sam Thompson, a person who had spent years promoting the opposite approach, admit that he had been wrong, was shocking. "Why the sudden change of heart?" Mia asked carefully. Sam's voice softened. "I had a conversation with my daughter the other day. She's in her final year of college, and she's doing a project on disability inclusion. She's been telling me about the work you're doing, and honestly, it made me question everything. My business decisions, the way I've led my companies. I've been too focused on profits and not enough on people. You've shown me that people are the real driving force behind success, not just numbers." Mia couldn't believe what she was hearing. "So, what are you proposing?" "I want to fund your next initiative. I want to help expand beyond the hire. We can turn this into something bigger, something that influences even the largest corporations. I've made a lot of mistakes in the past, and I want to make it right." I can help with resources, funding, and access to influential networks. I want to be an ally, not an obstacle. The offer was overwhelming, and Mia felt a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Sam Thompson was one of the last people she'd ever expected to reach out, but now, he was offering his support, and it was the kind of support that could change everything. After a long pause, Mia spoke. "All right, Sam. I'll take you up on your offer, but we need to do this right. It can't be about just ticking boxes. We're going to change the way society thinks about disability, and that means real, lasting change." "I'm in," Sam replied, determination in his voice. "Let's make this happen." The next few months were a whirlwind of meetings, brainstorming sessions, and strategic planning. Sam's involvement brought not only fresh resources but also a sense of urgency. With his expertise and connections, Mia was able to secure new partnerships and introduce, beyond the hire, into regions that had previously been resistant to inclusivity. One of the first initiatives Sam helped launch was a nationwide program focused on providing mentorship and leadership opportunities specifically for people with disabilities. This program, titled Pathways to Leadership, aimed to create a clear and structured path for individuals with disabilities to advance into high-level corporate roles. It wasn't just about entry-level positions anymore, it was about breaking down the barriers that kept people with disabilities from reaching their full potential. The program was a direct challenge to the corporate world's long-standing belief that people with disabilities could only occupy certain roles. With Sam's backing, they were able to offer mentorship from top executives across industries, access to leadership training, and opportunities to work on high-stakes projects. The aim was to create a pipeline that would lead individuals with disabilities into C-suite positions, thereby changing the landscape of leadership. Mia and Sam traveled to companies across the country, speaking at corporate conferences, universities, and even government forums, advocating for these new initiatives. As their message spread, they started to see tangible results. More businesses signed on to the Pathways to Leadership program, and the first cohort of participants began to emerge. One of the standout success stories was Isabella, a young woman who had struggled to find her place in the workforce due to her cerebral palsy. Though she was an exceptional problem solver, many companies had overlooked her, assuming she wouldn't be able to keep up with the demands of a fast-paced work environment. But when Isabella joined the Pathways to Leadership program, she was paired with a mentor who saw her potential, not her limitations. Under her mentor's guidance, Isabella thrived. She worked on critical projects that required innovation and strategic thinking. Her ability to think outside the box, combined with her determination, quickly made her an invaluable asset. Within a year, Isabella was promoted to a management role within her company, becoming one of the first individuals with a disability to hold such a position in the organization. Her success story became a beacon of what was possible, and it encouraged other companies to fully commit to the Pathways to Leadership initiative. But just as the program began to take off, a new challenge arose. There were whispers in the corporate world that this movement was creating an unfair advantage for employees with disabilities. Critics argued that businesses were now being forced to prioritize disability inclusion over merit, which they claimed could lead to a dilution of talent. Mia and Sam knew that these arguments were simply reflections of deep-seated biases, but they also knew they had to address them head-on. Mia took a deep breath and readied herself for the next battle. She wasn't about to let anyone undermine the progress they had worked so hard to achieve. Despite the early successes of the Pathways to Leadership program and the growing support for disability inclusion across multiple sectors, the backlash Mia and Sam had anticipated began to take root. The corporate world, especially its more conservative factions, grew louder in their criticism of what they saw as overcompensating for disability inclusion. Accusations of tokenism and reverse discrimination spread like wildfire, especially among boardrooms of large, traditional companies. They claimed that efforts to include more people with disabilities in leadership roles were diluting corporate standards and weakening the competitive edge of businesses. This criticism was not only from business leaders but also from political figures and pundits who had previously been quiet. The argument grew louder, that programs like Pathways to Leadership were fostering an atmosphere where people were being promoted based on their disabilities rather than their qualifications, skills, or achievements. Mia had expected some pushback, but this was different. The rhetoric was shifting from a gentle criticism to a full-scale war on the initiative. There were articles in major publications questioning whether companies were too focused on diversity, arguing that it was impacting business performance. Even some of the first companies that had signed up for Beyond the Hire and the new leadership program began to distance themselves, not wanting to be associated with what they called social engineering. Sam Thompson was equally concerned. He had always been a strategist, and while he had supported the initiative from the beginning, he now found himself questioning if they were overstepping. For the first time, he questioned whether the balance between inclusivity and merit was being struck properly. Maybe they have a point, Sam admitted during one late-night conversation with Mia. Maybe we are pushing too fast. Maybe we're doing this all wrong. Mia's heart dropped. She had worked too hard and had seen too many lives change to back down now. Sam, if we back down now, we're telling people with disabilities that their contributions don't matter. That their dreams are secondary to an outdated idea of what makes someone qualified. I know, Sam said, frustration creeping into his voice. But the rhetoric is getting out of hand. The media's piling on, and it's starting to turn into a political issue. We're going to be painted as a liberal agenda. That's the problem, Mia snapped, her voice sharp with conviction. This isn't about politics. This is about basic human dignity. About giving everyone a chance. If we're going to back down because of some criticism, we might as well never have started this movement in the first place. Sam leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. But how do we handle the PR storm? People are starting to question our integrity. Mia didn't flinch. She knew the storm was coming, but she also knew that the only way forward was to face it head-on. We need to keep telling the truth. We need to show the real stories. We need to remind them why this matters. The next day, Mia stood in front of a group of business leaders and journalists at a national conference, knowing full well that she was about to face their toughest questions yet. As she walked up to the podium, she could feel the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. The room was filled with skepticism, and she could almost hear the whispers behind her back. She wasn't just presenting her program anymore, she was defending it, and the future of the entire movement was on the line. Good afternoon, everyone, Mia began, her voice steady despite the anxiety running through her. I'm here to speak with you about something that's been changing lives across the country, something that, despite the noise, is working. The Pathways to Leadership initiative isn't about charity. It's about opportunity. It's about giving people with disabilities the same chances to rise through the ranks as anyone else, based on their abilities, their talents, and their drive. She paused for a moment to let her words sink in before continuing. I know that some of you may be questioning whether this initiative is too focused on diversity, whether it's diluting the very principles of merit and business acumen that drive success. And I understand that concern. But let me tell you, the people in our programs are not just participants, they're leaders. They are pushing boundaries, thinking differently, and driving innovation. They are changing companies, and they're changing the world. Mia glanced at the audience, noting the skeptical glances of some, the curiosity of others. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of society do we want to build? Do we want a world where opportunity is limited by outdated standards, or do we want a world where everyone, regardless of ability, can contribute in meaningful ways? Her voice grew stronger, the passion in her words palpable. This isn't about doing someone a favor. This is about recognizing the value in every human being. The fact that they happen to have a disability doesn't change that. It's the ideas they bring, the determination they possess, and the innovation they offer that will drive our companies, and our country, forward. After a long moment of silence, a hand raised from the back of the room. It was a journalist from a major business news outlet, and Mia steeled herself. So, are you saying that people with disabilities should be promoted over other, more qualified candidates? The journalist asked, voice dripping with skepticism. Mia stood tall, meeting the question head-on. I'm saying that people with disabilities are often overlooked, underqualified by society's standards, but they can excel given the right opportunity. Yes, it's about leveling the playing field. But no, it's not about promoting someone just because of their disability. It's about recognizing untapped potential and opening doors to talent that's been overlooked for far too long. That's what real leadership looks like. The room was quiet for a moment, and then another voice rose, this time from a business executive in the front row. I've seen the results firsthand, the man said. One of the employees from the Pathways to Leadership program helped us identify a major flaw in our cybersecurity system that saved us millions. I wasn't sure at first, but now I see it. These are the kinds of people we need in our organizations. They think differently. They bring new perspectives. We can't afford to ignore that anymore. Mia smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She had expected the backlash, but this was the moment they had all been working toward. Slowly, other business leaders began nodding in agreement. By the end of the conference, the narrative had shifted. While the skepticism remained, there was a growing acceptance that change was necessary. The next few weeks saw even more companies signing on to the initiative, and Mia was flooded with new support from unexpected quarters. It was clear now. The road ahead would be difficult, but Mia was more determined than ever. They had a long fight ahead, but the truth was on their side. The storm had passed, but the true test had only just begun. The Pathways to Leadership program had gained momentum, but with it came more intense scrutiny. The media, now divided, continued to debate the ethics and practicalities of disability inclusion in leadership positions. The pushback was relentless, with some calling it an overreach while others hailed it as the future of corporate America. For Mia, this was the moment she had been working toward. She wasn't naive enough to think that the road would always be smooth, but she understood that their next moves would determine whether they were part of a fleeting trend or the architects of lasting change. Mia sat in her office late one evening, reviewing the latest reports and strategizing for the next phase of the campaign. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from Sam Thompson. We need to talk. It's urgent. Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. A knot tightened in Mia's stomach. Sam hadn't sounded this serious in a while. She could only imagine what new challenges awaited them. The next morning, Mia walked into Sam's office, the weight of uncertainty hanging heavy. Sam was pacing by his window, his brow furrowed, his expression grim. Sam? Mia asked softly. He turned to face her, his face more serious than she had ever seen it. Mia, I've been talking to some of the higher-ups in my network. Some major companies are getting cold feet. They're pulling back from the Pathways to Leadership initiative. It's a ripple effect. Once one pulls out, others follow. The backlash is starting to bite harder than we expected. Mia's heart sank. She had known this could happen, but hearing it confirmed was a bitter pill to swallow. How bad is it? Some companies are still on board, but the ones we need, the major players, they're wavering. We've got a real problem here. There's this narrative that this movement is dividing the workforce, that it's putting too much emphasis on social issues rather than merit. I'm hearing a lot of executives say they're starting to see the cracks, that their businesses can't afford to alienate their core base by embracing a liberal agenda. Mia felt the weight of the room close in on her. It wasn't just her fight anymore. This was about corporate America as a whole. So what's the plan? I've been thinking about it all night, Sam said, sitting down at his desk. The one thing we haven't done yet is make a clear, public statement about why this movement matters beyond the boardroom. We've focused on the business case, but we need to make it personal. We need to show people, our critics, that this is a fight for human dignity, not just corporate policies. Mia nodded, sensing where this was going. You're saying we need to go public, make a bold move. But what exactly? We need to put a face to the movement, Sam said. I've already spoken to a few of the leaders in the program. One of them, Isabella, is a perfect example. She's the success story that could change everything. We need to take her story public in a big way, not just as an individual success, but as a statement about what inclusion truly means. We need to show people that this is about real talent, real results, and real impact. Mia thought for a moment. Isabella's story had been powerful, but it had only been shared within their inner circle. A public campaign that spotlighted her journey could shift the narrative. What do you need from me? Mia asked. I've arranged for a major media appearance, TV, social media, the works, Sam said. I want Isabella to be the face of it. But we need your personal involvement. It has to come from you as well. A story from someone like you, someone who's lived this fight, would make all the difference. Mia hesitated. She had always kept a low profile, preferring to focus on the cause rather than herself. But Sam was right. This wasn't just about the movement anymore. It was about human lives. It was about making people see the true value of what they were advocating for. All right, Mia said, her voice steady. Let's do it. The following week, Mia and Isabella appeared on a national morning talk show, a platform with millions of viewers. The cameras were bright, the studio buzzing with activity. Mia could feel the nerves in her stomach, but she reminded herself that this was the moment she had been waiting for. This was the chance to turn the tide. As the interview began, Isabella spoke first, sharing her personal story of struggle and triumph. She talked about how she had been overlooked time and time again in the corporate world, not because she lacked skills, but because of the assumptions people made about her disability. I was told I wouldn't be able to keep up with the work, Isabella said, her voice calm yet powerful. But I didn't stop trying. And then I joined the Pathways to Leadership program. That's when everything changed. I had the mentorship I needed, the opportunities one had been denied for so long. Now, I'm in a leadership role. And it's not because of charity. It's because I earned it. Mia watched as Isabella spoke with confidence, her words resonating deeply with the audience. Isabella's success wasn't just about personal achievement, it was a symbol of what could happen if companies embraced true inclusivity. Then it was Mia's turn. Isabella's story is just one of many, Mia began, her voice steady but passionate. I've seen firsthand how businesses can thrive when they open their doors to people with disabilities. This isn't a political statement. This isn't about ideology. It's about fairness. It's about recognizing the incredible talent that's been hidden in plain sight. We've spent too long underestimating people with disabilities. It's time we start seeing them for who they truly are, leaders, innovators, and game changers. As the interview came to a close, Mia and Isabella exchanged a look of quiet determination. This wasn't just a conversation, it was a call to action. The aftermath of the interview was immediate. Social media erupted with support. People began sharing their own stories of overcoming obstacles, of fighting for inclusion in their own lives. Business leaders started to shift their perspectives, realizing that this wasn't just about social responsibility, it was about the future of business. And in the weeks that followed, the tide began to turn. More companies recommitted to the Pathways to Leadership initiative, inspired by the authenticity and success of the campaign. Some even reported seeing a marked improvement in employee satisfaction and innovation as a direct result of their focus on inclusion. For Mia and Sam, the battle was far from over. But for the first time in months, they felt hopeful that they were on the right path. The change they had fought for was starting to take root. Months had passed since the pivotal interview with Isabella, and the Pathways to Leadership initiative had taken on a life of its own. Mia and Sam had seen their work grow beyond what they had ever imagined. The movement was no longer a niche program, but a widespread societal shift. The country was beginning to realize that diversity and inclusion were not just buzzwords but critical components of a thriving society and economy. As Mia stood at the head of a packed conference room, she could hardly believe the transformation. She was now giving a keynote speech at the annual Business Leaders Summit, an event once dominated by the corporate elite, those who had initially questioned the very principles she had fought for. Now, Mia found herself addressing some of the most influential figures in the business world, sharing her vision of a future where disability was no longer seen as a barrier to success but as a source of untapped potential. 5 years ago, we were told that disability inclusion was a nice idea, but that it was unrealistic. People said we were fighting an uphill battle. And yet, here we are, Mia said, her voice strong, her heart swelling with pride. We've created a world where a leader's worth is no longer determined by their physical abilities, but by their talents, ideas, and heart. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Today, the leaders of tomorrow are already in the room with us. They are the ones who see beyond disability and recognize what's truly important, the unique contributions that each of us can offer. And it's because of you, the companies who believed in this initiative, who saw the potential in people like Isabella, that we're standing here today. A round of applause broke out, but Mia wasn't done yet. However, she continued, we're not finished. Our work is not done. This is just the beginning. The true test of our progress will be how we continue to open doors, not just for people with disabilities, but for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. She could see the faces of business leaders lighting up with understanding. They were no longer just supporting an initiative, they were now invested in it, part of a larger movement that had already begun reshaping the corporate landscape. But just as the applause began to die down, one of the younger executives in the audience raised his hand. Mia, you've talked about the growth and success, but what happens when the novelty wears off? When the media attention fades and the pressure of business as usual creeps back in, he asked. The question was a sharp reminder of the challenge that still lay ahead. Mia smiled, recognizing the caution in the question, but it didn't rattle her. That's a fair question. And let me tell you, that's why we're building something that's sustainable. We're not just creating a program, we're changing the very structure of business itself. The work we've done is not just about filling quotas, it's about changing the culture. And a culture that embraces diversity doesn't fade away. It grows, it evolves, and it becomes the new standard. There was a pause, and then the room erupted into applause again. This time, it felt different. It felt like a turning point. Not just for the Pathways to Leadership initiative, but for the business world itself. As Mia left the stage, she was met by Sam, who had been in the back of the room, watching with pride. He clapped her on the back. You did it. You've changed everything, he said, his voice thick with admiration. Mia shook her head, the weight of it all still settling in. We did it. All of us. The leaders, the companies, the people who took the risk. This is just the start. But, Sam, I don't know if I'm ready for this responsibility. He smiled. You don't have to be. But you are. And you're not alone. Mia smiled back, knowing that he was right. They were no longer just advocates, they were leaders in a movement that would continue to reshape the future. Later that evening, Mia and Sam sat together in a quiet corner of the conference hall, reflecting on everything they had accomplished. You know, Sam said thoughtfully, when this all started, I had no idea where it would lead. But look at where we are now. We're not just fighting for people with disabilities anymore. We're fighting for every person who's ever been told they couldn't make it because of their circumstances. That's something powerful. Mia nodded, feeling the truth of his words sink in. And I'm proud to be part of it. But I think we need to start thinking about what happens next. What's the next step? Sam grinned. I think the next step is to make sure that every company, every industry, every corner of society is part of this movement. We can't let it stop here. Mia took a deep breath, feeling the excitement of the challenge ahead. You're right. We need to go beyond just corporate America. We need to change the way the world thinks about disability and potential. This isn't just about inclusion, it's about transformation. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, knowing the road ahead would be full of challenges and victories alike. But one thing was certain, they had started something unstoppable. And together, they would see it through. The sun was just beginning to set as Mia sat in her office, the glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. The campaign had grown beyond expectations, and it felt as though the world was shifting under her feet. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Isabella. Mia, we've got news. We're being invited to speak at the United Nations next month on disability inclusion. They want to hear our story. A wave of disbelief swept over Mia. The United Nations? This was the kind of global recognition she had dreamed of but never imagined would come so soon. It was more than a victory, it was validation, not just for her and the team, but for everyone who had believed in the power of inclusion. She quickly typed back, "This is incredible. Let's make it happen. I'll start preparing. Let's meet tomorrow." The following weeks were a blur of preparation. Mia, Sam, Isabella, and their team worked tirelessly to craft the perfect message. This wasn't just another conference, this was a chance to bring their message of inclusion to a global stage. The pressure was intense, but it felt different this time. Mia knew that they were no longer fighting just for themselves. They were fighting for something much larger, a world where barriers to success weren't determined by disability but by ability, passion, and potential. They flew to New York for the event, and as they walked into the iconic United Nations building, Mia couldn't help but feel the weight of history. This was the stage where world leaders gathered to discuss global issues. And now, they were here, ready to change the conversation about disability. Isabella, who had been Mia's ally in face of the initiative, was glowing with pride. "This is bigger than anything I ever imagined," she said quietly, as they passed through the halls. Mia nodded, her nerves rising, but also a sense of determination building inside her. "This is the moment we've worked for. This is about making a global impact." The day of the speech arrived, and the room was filled with dignitaries, activists, and business leaders from around the world. As Mia and Isabella took their seats, they could feel the weight of the eyes on them. This was their moment to be heard on a global stage. When their turn came, Mia stood first, her voice calm but steady as she approached the podium. She glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of the leaders who were now listening intently. She cleared her throat, feeling the importance of this moment in her bones. "Distinguished guests, thank you for the honor of speaking today," Mia began. "We stand before you not just as advocates for disability inclusion, but as champions of a world where all people, regardless of their abilities, are given the chance to lead, innovate, and thrive." She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. 5 years ago, many of us were told that inclusion would never work. People with disabilities were seen as too much of a risk, too much of an unknown. But we proved them wrong. We've seen businesses transformed, leaders rise, and innovation flourish when we put talent above all else. Isabella took the stage next, her voice steady and powerful. "When I was told I wasn't leadership material, I didn't let it stop me. Instead, I worked harder. I got the training I needed, the mentorship, and the opportunity to prove myself. I'm here today because I was given a chance, because people believed in me." Her words resonated with the room. The audience sat in rapt attention, listening to the story of a woman who had overcome the odds not only to succeed, but to lead. Mia continued, "Our message is simple: inclusion isn't just good for business, it's the right thing to do. It's about giving people the opportunity to show what they're capable of. And once you see the results, there's no turning back." The room was silent, hanging on every word. "The world is watching us now," Mia finished, "and we can either continue to shut doors, or we can open them wide and let the talent flood in." Let us be the leaders who don't just talk about change, but who make it happen. As Mia and Isabella left the podium, the applause was overwhelming. For a moment, Mia stood still, feeling the weight of everything they had fought for, everything they had achieved. This wasn't just about one speech. This was about setting a precedent for the future. A future where businesses recognized not just the value of inclusivity, but its necessity. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of media coverage, interviews, and follow-up conversations. The impact of the speech at the United Nations reverberated around the globe. Major organizations and governments began taking note. Disability rights organizations that had once felt isolated now saw a rising tide of support from across the business world. Corporate leaders who had been hesitant to invest in inclusion now began to see it as not just a moral responsibility but a business imperative. But the most significant change was at the grassroots level. People with disabilities from all walks of life began to share their stories, feeling emboldened by the message Mia and Isabella had spread. What had once been a fight for the right to be seen was now a movement for empowerment, growth, and the reshaping of societal norms. Mia stood before the mirror in her office, the reflection staring back at her, a woman who had once felt small in the face of impossible odds, but who had now become a symbol of change. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Sam. "I just got off the phone with a global consortium of tech companies. They're committing to a joint initiative to create pathways for leadership for people with disabilities. This is huge, Mia." Her heart skipped a beat. This was the confirmation they had been waiting for. The business world was ready for change, and they were leading it. She typed back, "This is it. We've broken through. Let's keep pushing. The world is changing, and it's because of all of us." Mia knew the fight was far from over. But now, she had no doubt that they were on the cusp of something that could change the world forever. This was just the beginning of a new era. And together, they were going to build a future where leadership was defined by potential, not limitation. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?